So our version of this is virtual collaborators. And so you mentioned computer use. Computer use is maybe an early instantiation of that. It's one of the ingredients. But I think the thing we have in mind is, and this could be, an assistant in your workplace, an assistant that you use personally, but there's a model that is able to do anything on a computer screen that a kind of virtual human could do. And you talk to it, you give it a task, and maybe it's a task it does over like a day where, you say, we're going to implement this product feature. And what that means, it's writing some code, testing the code, deploying that code to some test surface, talking to coworkers, writing design docs, writing Google Docs, writing Slack, sending emails to people. And just like a human, the model goes off and does a bunch of those things and then checks in with you every once in a while.
So, Chris, this week, the agent hype is out of control. Yet again, we just heard from the Anthropic CEO at Davos talking about these future virtual collaborators. We're hearing even more rumors about OpenAI about to release Operator, which is similar to Anthropic's computer use that can perform tasks on your behalf. But we also had some kind of far out there news with potentially having a Stargate open to either burn a lot of cash or get us to some sort of AI god level, which we'll soon find out and talk about. But I think the most interesting news of the week was the release of Deepseek-R1, which is said to be on par with Claude's Sonnet and OpenAI's O1, but completely open source and extremely cost effective. You can even run a distilled version on your own hardware, which was a huge breakthrough. And we'll get to all that stuff in a minute. You watched the Anthropic CEO's comments at Davos. What did you make of what he's predicting for the 2025 year of agents?
I really liked it. I thought he was very grounded, and I hadn't really listened to him speak beyond short clips before. And I was particularly interested that his vision around the sort of workspace computer and that being the interface that the AI uses to get to the next level of helpfulness for humans is exactly the same as ours. Like, I know we sound like massive Anthropic shills on this podcast, but it's because that's where we're seeing the most excitement around the ability to control a computer and therefore do anything that a human currently does when they're using that interface. And it's interesting to hear him use almost the exact words that we've used over the last few months around the vision for this. Now, admittedly, it was their model that allowed us to do that in our product. But at the same time, it's very exciting to see that's the direction they're moving in, because I feel like we're onto something with this ability for the AI to control a computer.
Yeah, there was another interview with the head of product at OpenAI at Davos as well. And he talked about use cases for OpenAI's upcoming Operator as well, saying that, there's these tasks that you don't want to be doing. And he gave an example of filling in forms for your kids' soccer, which my wife actually was doing the other night. And it's insane how much data they want to collect on you just to play in a local kids' soccer comp. But one of his examples is saying that it can go off and just fill those forms in for you. And interestingly, if long-time listeners of the show would note, when we released computer use on SimTheory, one of the immediate use cases, it was me completing training, online training courses in the background while we actually recorded one of the shows, because I didn't want to do them. I feel like it's a waste of my time. So we've already kind of seen that can be used to go off in the background and complete these boring tasks. And I felt like from the success of computer use in general, people got so excited, I know, in SimTheory. I mean, it really blew up when we released that, because I think computer use and having an agent that can go off in the background and do things that you otherwise don't want to do is really useful. It's actually a useful application of AI when it works.
Yes, and I was saying this to you before the podcast, that I really feel like we sort of did a one shot and released that, and we've made no updates to it since we released it, despite its popularity. And I feel like there's a lot of low-hanging fruit when it comes to that stuff. For example, common patterns that you use on the computer, like opening a web browser, navigating to a website, logging in. right now it's literally doing all of those tasks from scratch as if it's never seen them before, just other than the training that Anthropic's given it. Whereas you can give it multi-shot inputs, like including screenshots and examples, text to encourage it to do certain things, not to mention almost like macros in terms of remembering how to do certain actions or avoiding certain pitfalls. So I feel like with some love and attention to that MCP concept, we're actually going to see much better usage of the desktop computer. And I think it's an area that we'll personally invest our time in, and that others should too, because the leverage of it is so high. And when you look at the feedback about it, most people are talking about prompt crafting in order to get it to do things that they've seen it successfully do before. And I feel like those are lessons we shouldn't have to learn over and over again. Like we should give it the ability to remember, hey, this was successful. Here's how I did it.
Yeah, and this whole market around, there was a Y Combinator startup, I forget the name of the company, released this week, and their whole business is actually dedicated to giving agents computer access, so it can like call up a computer and then complete some sort of task on the computer. So you can see this sort of tool-based economy evolving around these self-driving computers, because to get to some true sense of agency, it's going to be a combination of these components. I think some computer use, and Dario in his interview alluded to this, some form of computer use, some form of model context protocol. That's the ability for, say, having an app on your computer to make edits to files based on what the LLM or the agent wants to do. And you can see this becoming quite powerful to the point where I think this year you're going to get very used to and reliant on these agents going off and doing work for you, whether it's, filling in forms and a lot of boring tasks first, but then you can really envisage in the future how this expands and does turn into that full virtual human coworker. Like, instead of the promise of like a Devon, which everyone sort of is struggling with, I think the virtual coworkers in an organization, these agents, in a year and a half, it's going to happen like 100%.
And it's interesting that Darius specifically acknowledged the idea of that they're specifically targeting the enterprise, and it's just a side effect if it happens to work for consumer-based stuff, much different to the operator concept, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And the other thing is, he talked about this idea of he compared agents and collaborator as sort of different terminology. I think he talks more about like an AI companion collaborator who's working with you. And the idea that it will be able to do sort of any arbitrary task and a complex array of tasks in order to accomplish stuff, like you heard in that clip at the start, like, commit to GitHub, log into Slack, do all this stuff. And he also talked about the idea of a computer where it's logged into everything and stuff, similar to what we've done. So it's very interesting that he's talking about that, rather than the idea of this sort of, just giving it the ability to spin up a Docker container, run a process, and then come back and then do another one, and so on. So it is very interesting that they're talking about this idea of like an always on companion, which is something we've talked about from the beginning, rather than a sort of function calling system that just happens to use a computer in some of its tasks.
I can imagine in the enterprise right now, the first use case we're going to get outside of all the dream state. Like, I know everyone likes to dream about the future, I do too, of this like full self-driving computer that can go off in the background and accomplish anything a human can. And I do think we will get there eventually. But I think in the shorter term, like, what do we get this year out of it? Especially in your workday, to me, would be being able to coach it and train it on very repetitive tasks. Like, if you fill in loan applications as your primary job, you can have an agent that's specifically trained in that task. And with your assistant, you're like, hey, I need to fill in this loan application. Here's the details. Can you go off and do it in the background? And the agent that assistant calls, that agent is specially trained to handle that particular process for now autonomously and make decisions along the way, obviously taking advantage of what the LLM is best at. But I know that people argue, but couldn't you just automate that with automation? But but I think it's far
But
beyond
see,
that.
I imagine it operating systems that were made in like Visual Basic 2005 and stuff, where there's like no chance of an API, no way that browser automation is going to be able to like target it somehow. You know, the kind of things that people run in like like it's triple virtualized. It's like running on some, 486 DX2 in the corner with dust all over it, and then it's VM'd into something else, which is VM'd into something else. And they have it because it's a working system, and then the AI operators. That's my dream. That's what gets me most excited, is the idea of operating these crazy old systems like Lotus Notes and stuff automatically using AI. Like bringing AI to things that just definitely shouldn't have it is what gets me excited.
But do you know what I don't get? So the rumor, and I'll bring it up on the screen now, is that it's going to come out this week. OpenAI preps operator for release this week. The examples they cite with ChatGPT's operator are going to be things like a miniature screen that opens up in the chatbot and displays a browser, and what actions the operator is taking. That sounds very familiar. The agent will also ask follow-up questions like the time and number of people for a restaurant reservation. So I've actually successfully used multiple times now the workspace computer feature in SimTheory to do just this, to book a restaurant for my wife and I. I've booked successfully 3 restaurants with it. I guess the learning I took away from that is that in the consumer world, it's far quicker in most cases still to, unless they've got something a lot faster than the current computer use technology, it's still much quicker to just go do that yourself, unless you don't really care and it's going off in the background, right? But if it's immediate, it's still just way quicker for you to just do it. And by the time you brief the operator in this case, you would have been better to just go find it on Google and book it yourself. But then this is why I see enterprise, and I think Dario's right, being the immediate use cases. It's that drudgery work, I think, that it actually is the best at right now. Like filling in forms, stepping through all of these different parts of the job that you just don't want to do right now to give you back like productive time. To me, that vision is correct. I just wonder if the consumer's just going to be disappointed initially by the sort of V1 of this technology, and therefore, I don't know, sort of sours on the idea a little bit.
Yeah, it seems to me like the things people are excited about using it for are the drudgery parts of their job, like the security training and like, filling in forms and silly things like that that just have to happen, and it's just time consuming and whatever. And when it comes to those other novelty items, I just always, and like you always correct me on this because I always say, oh, they pick such stupid examples like and all that. But you remind me they have the brand recognition. People think AI is ChatGPT, and the kinds of people using that probably don't necessarily have the enterprise stuff. But the actual interviewer in that Darius interviewer raised a really good point. She said, you don't target consumers, but the consumers are also the people working in these enterprises. Like we're all just humans. And so in a way, I guess one thing we noticed with the workspace computer is you sort of open people's eyes to the possibilities through doing silly examples. And then they're like, hang on a sec, but I could also use this for this complicated work process that I have to do all the time. And so,
Yeah,
yeah, you go.
I think a big part of it is like this idea of like agents at work, agents at home, right? Like I just don't know if someone like Anthropic with Claude is going to be able to successfully compete against is it Project Astra, I think, by Google, which is that omnipresent assistant they're building. They announced some updates to today as well. I think in the consumer world, people like Google and maybe ChatGPT to some extent, it's already somewhat won. Like, I just don't really see how Apple and Google don't win that consumer app-like experience. But I think where the real opportunity is for developers, for Anthropic, for Amazon, for all of these providers is definitely going and building these co-workers in the enterprise. Like to me, that is where the money is and where the big productivity gains lie. As
I just
opposed
also
to,
think it's more interesting. Like the whole reason someone asked me last night, like, oh, why do you guys do the podcast? And like, do you have sponsors or whatever? I'm like, no, we don't have any of that. I said the reason we did it and the reason we started it is we're just interested in this stuff. We want to see how it plays out and what's possible. And I think that doing things like booking a restaurant and stuff, we were talking about that a year ago. Like, I want to see the complex, interesting stuff it can do that just delights me and it's just totally unexpected. Like, oh, someone actually has a second job and they're doing the whole job just by running an AI agent on a computer. Like that kind of stuff to me is what's really exciting and cool. As opposed to, oh, I can use it to make things slightly more convenient in my life.
Yeah, I think it has a place for those things too. I'm just not sure, like, to me, when you see it as like what everyone hopes it will be, like where it's groundbreaking in terms of the economic impact it has, I think for us to believe it, for us to believe that it's worth spending $500 billion on this Stargate thing, you're going to have to prove the value. And like the value's got to come from like research breakthroughs by researchers being able to send off agents to go and like experiment with things. All of those components of it are what gets me excited, that you could scale your research or scale yourself in your day-to-day job. So I don't know. I think overall I'm pretty optimistic and excited about how this year plays out, because they've clearly got significantly improved models with Operator, and I really hope that gets released through an API so we can push it to its limits and actually see if it's on par with computer use, or how the model context protocol stuff fits into all of this as well.
One other interesting thing in the Darius interview that I found probably the most interesting aspect of it to me was he made this comment about the hype boys and all these games they play on Twitter. He still calls it Twitter. Around like, oh, something's coming, better be careful, like, and this kind of stuff. But he wasn't saying it from the perspective of, oh, they're overhyping it. He was saying it from the perspective of they're not taking it seriously enough, like as in it's actually a really big deal what is coming. And the people who are actually hyping it up aren't taking it seriously enough, which I thought was a crazy thing from a guy who obviously has deep insights into what's going on. Like, as in, he's saying don't trivialize it because it is big. And that's pretty interesting. Like, I really wonder what they've got coming in terms of models, because he was very dismissive of things like the interviewer was like, oh, how come you guys don't have an image generation model? He's like, because it's just not relevant to what we're doing. If we need one, we'll partner with someone. And then she asked about some other consumer level thing. He's like, we're just simply not interested in that. So I really feel like their continued focus on the core models is going to yield good results this year. Like, I predict now that we'll see something big from Anthropic in terms of model evolution. And honestly, I back them over OpenAI to come out with something far more significant. Like, as you know, I'm thoroughly unimpressed with O1. I don't get any good results out of it. I don't think it's better than a normal model at all, in my opinion. It may benchmark better, but I just don't believe it. And I just back Anthropic to come out with something big, especially based on my hot take of that guy's interview that I watched for 20 minutes.
Do you think that, though, I think they're right, and here's why. Whoever solves the self-driving computer, we've talked about it way too many times on the show, but whoever solves it, like, imagine you've got an agent that can literally do anything a human can do, but is far smarter, far superior, and can stay on track. And context, I think, is the biggest problem, which no one seems to be talking about.
Yeah,
in context focus, like those two problems, I think, are way bigger than the model getting smarter. The models are capable now, but think about it. So let's say all those problems are solved. We have a full self-driving computer. I think he's right. Like, you cannot imagine the economic impact of that. Like, it literally wipes out almost every job instantly.
That's right. There's so many jobs that will be possible with a fully controllable computer. And I've actually been doing a lot of experimenting around this myself in terms of context construction. Like, as you know, we've been looking at how can you get an MCP computer model thing to like access the relevant files that you're currently focused on. So not just see the desktop that it's operating with, but get at the actual underlying stuff that it's looking at. So, okay, you've got VS Code open in your computer and it can see that you have a certain file open. Give it access to the actual direct file system as well, so it can take the files directly, not just like OCR the screen in order to make that interpretation. Like, we've seen such good results with screen sharing. We've seen good results with the computer operation. When you take it to the next level and give it a whole bunch of tools that it intimately knows how to do to interact with the computer for both input and, I say output, more like actuation on the computer, and it takes it to the next level. And I think that seeing things like the new Gemini model that's come out with large amounts of output tokens, which we'll talk about later, is very exciting to me, because to me that's where the next level is. The thing that I find hardest with the models is I can now construct incredibly good context, and I think that's a solvable problem, and it's just a matter of time before we personally get there, let alone the big guys. Um, I think the next issue is going to be how much can it do as a result of that? And the as you've seen, when the models iterate a lot, you sort of get a sort of lost in translation effect, and you almost need to refresh the context as you go to make sure it stays on track. And I feel like the next big problem to solve is going to be that either much larger output so you can do a lot more in one shot, or when that iteration happens, the ability to keep a model on track in terms of its context is going to be really important in terms of operating a computer like all day, like Darius says. Because
Mm.
to me, when you look at the operation of computers now with AI, it's fine when you're sitting there instructing it and working with it, and you're using your human eyes and human brain to see what's going on and give it the next direction. Like, oh shit, it accidentally minimized the window. I'll tell it to reopen the window and do whatever. Like, that's not going to work if it's running all day. What you need to be able to do is it has an overall purpose, and it's able to reset, work out where it's at, take stock, update its context, and not I guess not have the context of what it's doing cloud its overall goal, if that makes sense. Like it needs to be either a multi-agent system or at least have a separation of concerns in the way it operates.
I mean, if they've solved this problem or just say improved it by like 50%, and that's what he's seeing, and he can see how you can get to where it's fully solvable, that like, I don't know what we're calling it, but like context focusing or something where it doesn't lose the plot, then yeah, I can see how he's sitting back going, oh my God, this is going to wipe out every white collar job potentially on Earth. At least the ones that sit in front of a computer all day long. But I'm just not sure I buy into this like existential crisis stuff around that. I feel like it's going to take a lot longer than they say, because when you're working with what's readily available today, and again, we don't have access to what they've got, but I just don't understand how you get, like chat GBT task that's like, had some epic fails released when it's alleged they've got these other crazy ass models. Like, can't it write better code for them? Like, I guess there's a disconnect between what they're out there saying and what they're delivering, these companies. And that's why I sort of struggle. So sorry, there's that disconnect. And then my disconnect, which is working with this stuff every waking hour of the day, trying to push it to the absolute max stream limit and realizing all these fundamental flaws, and then hearing what they say. I'm like, what am I missing? Like,
Yeah, absolutely. I also feel like they would, in their examples, they'd be selecting different examples if they had something that was far further down the line than what we're seeing. I mean, you never know. There might be the guys locked away in the research lab in the hills somewhere who have something far more advanced. But when they're talking about the examples of like booking a restaurant with an automated agent and stuff like that, you know that they're not further down the line, because they wouldn't be giving such trivial examples if they had already done something that was far further. However, the Anthropic interview was very interesting because he was dismissive of some of the more trivial examples of these things. In particular, he was very dismissive of the thinking models in general. He was basically saying, look, it's a spectrum. And I assume he means a spectrum in terms of how much you allow a model, or what I call like an AI system, to iterate. Um, and he was very dismissive of that, being like, oh, well, that's just like one approach to using it, essentially. And I kind of agree, because we were talking on Discord this week. A few people have been getting really good results with Sim Theory's Think skill, which is basically our own interpretation, or my own interpretation of how I think the O1 model actually operates, which is to basically give itself multiple iterations, asking the right kind of questions to evolve its thinking or build its context around the problem it's trying to solve before it gives a final answer. And to me, that really is just part of a constructed AI system, and it's just one approach of getting more out of the models. Like we always talk about, there's more in these models than what we see and what we get, because of not prompting it correctly or not building a correct context. And I feel like what the O1 model, or maybe even Deepseek-R1 is doing, is really taking the time to construct a better context for it so it's able to do better. That's what I think O1 is. I think R1's different. Sorry, I need to clarify
I
that.
guess a bit I'm struggling with, right? And you raise a good point about like the models are pretty smart under, like you can dig out the intelligence from them. And like I think about, say, Claude as a model, and even the new Deepseek-R1, which we'll cover in a minute. These models, in my opinion, are smart enough, like especially for a virtual collaborator. Like they're already far smarter than the average human and me. Like they are so much smarter than us. Yeah, they're gullible sometimes and they make silly mistakes. You've still got to have critical thinking, but overall they're pretty smart.
Yeah.
And smart enough to do almost all white collar jobs that sit in front of a computer. But then I think, okay, well, why can't we just now build something that immediately replaces this? And what I don't understand is no one's talking about the focusing of like the context focus problem and the sort of call it iteration 10, where it just loses the plot because its context is filled with the wrong information. To me, why aren't they out there saying that, like, we need to find the right context? Like we're working on a model that can track context better, because like you hear, Google Gemini-Thinking, 1 million context, yada, yada. I use them all the time. They're no different to using, say, Claude, apart from it can just ingest a lot more shit.
The other thing is, the reason I don't like necessarily the idea of a thinking model is that right now I get the best results from large language models when I work with them and we build context over time, and it builds memories about what I'm doing, and it has grounded memories and references. And I reach a point where there's this like beautiful, I call it the hummingbird level of context, where we're on the same page. We know exactly what we're working on. Me and Patricia, my flirty Python girlfriend. That's her name. She's great. When I'm working with like a non-agent, like the direct sim theory agent or whatever, it's shit. And it gets all snippy and annoyed with me. And whereas Patricia, we work together. And that's the thing. Everyone's reported this experience just by using this basic flat memory and the built up context. You can get to a point where every question you ask of them, even with minimal context, will give you a beautiful, perfectly formed answer. It gets to know your preferences. So what I've really been thinking about lately is, how can we expand an agent's memory to get into those kinds of states for tasks before you even start them? Like, how can we actually build out a vibrant context for a task automatically in advance before we actually start executing on it? So let me give you an example. So one of the things I've been doing lately is, say I want to work on a coding problem, I'll go and get the relevant API docs, all the relevant files that I have in my code that are relevant to that problem, a screenshot of where the target place is or what I'm trying to do, any relevant console output and things like that, and anything else I think is relevant to the task. And I'll take the time to build up that context in advance before I even ask my first question. Once I do that, I get to that state much quicker. To me, the next evolution of the computer use and just task like completion in general for the agents is that sort of automatic context creation where it does it, like where it decides what the things are that it's going to need in order to build this perfect context for the task. And it goes off and does that using the various tools that are available to it before it then instructs either another agent or itself to complete the task. And then once that happens, what I think is needed is a far more advanced kind of AI memory that is almost like either a graph database, an SQL database that it controls the schema of, or some other sort of database where it's able to categorize its memories in terms of importance, relevance, those kind of things. So it can draw on those when building future context based on tasks it successfully solved in the past. And like you say, there's so much latent ability in these models when you get them in the right state that I don't feel like the next evolution of getting this task-based human collaborator stuff going well is going to come from some sort of 20% higher benchmark or some shit. It's going, hang on. It's going to come, we both did a double bleep. So I think what it's going to come from is a system that is built around that involves heavily the AI in it, like participating in that system, of course, but it's not going to just be a model that iterates on itself without any additional input, where
But
it's
this is what I
simply
don't get around when the models are getting supposedly smarter and hitting all these benchmarks. Like I personally in my day-to-day have not noticed since Claude Sonnet came out any model that makes me want to daily drive it or that seems markedly better. Like they all seem about the same right now to me. It seems like the problem, as you say, is sort of the system or tooling and the expectation that a new model is going to suddenly achieve AGI or like replace us all on the computer is just so far-fetched and stupid to me at this point in time, because I'm like, it's the tooling stupid. Like
yeah.
we need the tooling.
Because even if you had the smartest model ever, like even if you had a model that could do literally the entire job of someone, like they had all the same intelligence, all the same abilities, absolutely everything the same, they still need to be able to access the information. They still need to know how to do all the stuff that that person does in order to get that job. So all this surrounding tooling is going to be required, regardless of how good the model is. And so I feel like a lot of what we hear when we talk about the stuff now is not the actual core models themselves, and people are very quick to jump on, oh, Deepseek-R1, it solves everything. This is the solution. We're there, guys. Woo, we did it.
A thread.
And I just don't think, no matter how good it is, and it is good, that is what is going to be some sort of major advancement this year. I think the advancements this year are going to come around the combination of the technologies and building these systems. And like you've spoken about to me many times, like building a system that anticipates the advancements in the models, ready to make the most of them when they come. And I really feel like, at least with sim theory, that's what we're going to be doing, is uh, finding a way to make sure, like we know that Anthropic is going to come out with a much better computer use model at some time down the line this year. We'll be ready for it. I think that's really where my thinking's at.
I think,
with this
but
stuff.
and we'll get to sort of the code comparisons of all these models in a minute. We've done some work behind the scenes to sort of give you a sort of hopefully a good snapshot and allow everyone to vote which model did best, like sort of like a fashion show. But to me, like this is what we need, is the fusion of all of these technologies together, and that's what you'll see in a minute. With our new Create with Code mode on SimTheory, we've fused together like so many different pieces of the AI puzzle or the tooling around it to get you to a better end product, right? And I think for agents or computer use agents or whatever we're calling them, that's like all of the pieces are out there, like model context protocol, computer use, whatever the hell OpenAI has, which not very open, they probably won't even give us access to. But there's a number of open source projects as well. Like all of those components are out there. It's just now it's the part of piecing them together and designing agents in such a way that you can sort of like fine tune them on pretty credible tasks, similar to how you would build an assistant today, where you're like, you are the best trained doctor in the world. The agent version of that is basically like, you are the best, kids soccer application form filler in a Here's roughly how you do that to sort of skip ahead, and here's the authentication you need to do that.
Well, here's another example I think that we've discovered in building code mode. It's what do you call it? Almost like contingent instructions. So you want to prompt it and say, hey, you're going to build this code. Here's all the tools here's all the libraries and tools and stuff you have available to you. If you choose to invoke this tool, here's some special instructions that you must honor. And, if you choose to do this, here's some special stuff you must honor. And there's so much of that stuff. And at least in Sim Theory's version, a lot of the work that has gone into it has been around building the perfect context to make sure you're not distracting the models, especially the lesser models, with stuff that it doesn't need to worry about at the time. You'll find that the bigger the model, or the sort of more prominent the model, the better it is at understanding which instructions are relevant for it at the time, and the less work you need to do that. But I feel like as the problems that the AI is solving are more advanced, you almost need like a tree-like prompt, like where it can go down a path and go, okay, I'm going to do this. Now I'll get the instructions relevant to that. And make sure that what it's being given is distilled down into only the relevant things it needs to worry about that. Or I guess the alternative is the models get so good they do that themselves internally. Like
Yeah.
that would be the dream, is that the models themselves are able to worry
Yeah,
about
like
that. And maybe that's
threading basically of
yeah.
thoughts.
Yes, exactly. Because I find that if you don't do that kind of thing, and you've hit some of these issues yourself in our testing, where we were trying with Gemini, the new Gemini, and it was getting muddled up between some of the instructions around running updates, thinking that they were what was expected in its output format, and um, that's a kind of a hard problem to solve, because it's either trial and error, or it's okay, let's take a totally different approach with this model in terms of
But you know
how
what
we
I think
speak to it.
it's more obvious in these models, like that was using Gemini 2 Flash Thinking, the latest model, and we'll get to that now. But I think these smaller distilled models are just, they struggle with instruction following. They do. Like that's their one weakness. The more you shrink the model, the instruction following seems to just fall off a cliff, especially with these more complex instructions or like buried instructions. I'm sure you could tune the prompt down to that model to get it perfect, but it does, each model requires like pretty good tuning.
Yes, and I think the point that I'd like to make around that is, I like we've spoken about this a lot. I think a lot of the best AI-based software that's going to come out is where people take the time to fine tune. It's probably not the best terminology, to work with the prompt to get it specialized at whatever task it's trying to do. But what we're talking about is a more generalized thing where we've got an AI collaborator, and we're going to ask it to do something, a task that it may not have seen before, or a combination of those tasks. And I feel like these problems will sort of rear their ugly heads in those environments when there hasn't been someone sitting there crafting the prompt for these individualized tasks. So I think that's what the model providers really need to solve if they want to win in this area, is how do you get prompting that is able to be uh, to overcome these problems without a sort of human massaging it into the right context.
So let's move on and talk about the release this week of Deepseek-R1. This is by the Chinese company, obviously DeepSeek. Performance on par with OpenAI O1, fully open source with a technical report, MIT license, so you can distill the model, you can commercialize it freely, you can also train on its outputs. It's available completely free on chat.deepseek.com. And they have an API which is vastly cheaper. I forget how many times cheaper than OpenAI, but it's like 10 or 30 times cheaper. It's insane. Obviously, on the benchmarking, it comes out mostly on par or on top with the leading models. Pretty incredible. I mean, I like, I don't even know what to make of it. I've used it. I've been using it, and it's pretty good. It's like literally, I would say, on par with Claude Sonnet and O1 from my initial testing. So pretty
Yeah, I
big
mean,
news.
I tend to not compare models to O1. Like, I don't know if I've just had a bad experience, but I don't like O1. I don't use it because I find it's pretty terrible at instruction following. I don't like the way it formats its output, and I don't find its results very useful. Maybe it's just the way I use it and the kinds of problems I'm trying to solve, but for the extra delay you have to wait for, and the fact that it doesn't give much better results, and even when it does give good results, I don't trust it. I'm not a big fan. Whereas DeepSeek R1, like I've operated for whole days on it now, with no problem at all. Like I find it as good as Claude Sonnet to work with, basically. I mean, there might be minor nuances in certain scenarios, like, and it definitely has its quirks in terms of how it's very eager to output code examples for when you're asking it problems, for example. But really, it's a great model. It's good to work with, and it's fast.
I literally can't tell like the difference between using it and Claude Sonnet. It's fast. I think it's far superior than O1 day to day if you're just using it like as a general model. I also think it sort of just makes a complete mockery of OpenAI's O1 series models. I mean, it was supposedly just trained just using reinforcement learning, like automated reinforcement learning, like without a human in the loop. Like they weren't giving it sort of, like the human sort of feedback piece of it. It's very impressive, very low cost. Like they don't have a lot of funding. They're proving that you don't have to spend a lot of money. You don't have to have the best GPUs in order to train these models. It also kind of got me thinking and I mentioned Stargate at the top of the episode, this $500 billion investment that OpenAI and others are making in a data center. We'll talk about where they're going to get the money from. But the crazy thing to me is like, is this path where China, has had the scope, like, they're GPU poor to some extent. They don't have access to the best GPUs. Is this forcing them to innovate to the point where they are going to end up with better AI models, more performant AI models, potentially making technological breakthroughs because they just can't use scale to train their models?
I'm asset rich, cash rich, and GPU poor.
Yeah, but or you could take the other side of the argument, which is I think DeepSeek was certainly trained on the outputs of Claude, Sonnet, and O1. Like it's just very obvious when you use it that it is.
I think O1 is a hack. I don't actually think it's a real model. I think it's a hack. I think it's using GPT-4o or something under the hood, or some slightly modified model under the hood, and there's a software layer that's doing the magic that makes it O1. I think the O3 model is probably going to be a real model, but I don't think O1 is even real. I reckon it's a hack. That's my personal
What, a
opinion.
hack to train O3?
No. I just think they needed to release something, and I think what they did was they tried tooling around at some sort of AI system on the back end that uses multiple models or mixture of the mixture of experts where you're actually using multiple models, not within the same model, I mean, and they're using it that way. And it's similar to what we did with the think thing in sim theory, which is sort of why I did it, to prove that point. That's what I think.
I mean, you might be right, and then they use that combination to train O3, and that's why it will be such a leap. I mean,
I think probably they're not gonna bother to release another hacked model. But I think the reason why people who are using it intensely aren't seeing great results with O1 is because it isn't actually a real evolution.
Do you think that's because Dario, like kind of what Dario was saying in the interview, is
yes, I do think that's what he's saying. I think because he said, "Oh, it's a spectrum, and essentially we could choose to do that too if we wanted. It's just we don't think it's any good." And I do think that's what he was saying.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. It feels like on Twitter there's so much hype for O1 and O1 Pro saying how great they are and stuff like that. But I don't know. Like I'm the same as you. Like I want to believe sort of thing, and I want great models. I don't have any vested interest in it not being good because we have all the models on say sim theory. So I don't really care. I just go to the best model, and I know our audience does too. And I can tell you again, just from usage, like, I mean, in the past week or ever, like not even week, it's been like 3 days since we put DeepSeek in. It's being used at the same rate as O1. So it doesn't, like, I don't know. It doesn't make any sense.
I think the real test for me is like, if you've got a real problem that really matters for your job or whatever it is where you really need to get good results, are you going to O1 if you have the option for others? That would be my question to people. If they're like, yeah, absolutely, I go there every time, it always solves my problem.
I think if you're stuck in the ChatGPT ecosystem, then yeah, you probably are. But you would also probably not have the knowledge that there's these far greater models. And I think that brings me to Gemini-2 Flash Thinking Update Experimental 01-21 variant. Great name. But Google did sort of subtly announce over on X that the Flash Thinking model's been updated. 1 million token context window native code execution support, longer output token generation, which I know interests you a lot, less frequent model contradictions. Also, they didn't really mention it, but it's insanely fast.
It's so fast. I mean, I must say, it's the first Google model where, because I just put it in because we always just put the latest in so our users can try it. gave it a quick spin to check everything was working. And then I was like, hang on a sec. Whoa, this thing is lightning fast, like so fast. It's astonishing. And then I used it with code mode just to see what it produced. And I was like, hang on a sec. This is pretty amazing. I got it to make a Bank of Queensland phishing website, just because that's one of my experiments.
One
And
of your
geez,
common tests.
yeah, it did a really good job. Like, I've been making I've got a series of silly websites I make and games I make and things like that. And part of it is because it is so fast, you can iterate so fast, and so it's a really nice, aesthetically pleasing experience. And the results, normally with the Gemini Flash ones, that you'll hit onto something where it's just so weird, and you're just like, nah, this is no good. Whereas this one's great. And as you mentioned, then I noticed when I was putting it into Sim Theory, hang on, 65,536 or whatever it is output tokens. We haven't seen that in a model since I think one of the Mistral ones. And in my experience, all of the models that have over 8,000 tokens output simply just won't output more tokens no matter what you try. And I've tried a lot of stuff. I get the AI to write its own prompts to try to get more output, and you can't do it. So anyway, I made a test with Gemini, and I'll read you out what I did. So I got it to write its own prompt. I was like, if you were constructing a prompt to get the most possible output, what would you write? And so it basically said, please write an extremely detailed, hang on, I got to turn on word wrap here. Please write an extremely detailed technical analysis of the complete history of computing, starting from ancient calculation tools through to modern quantum computing. Includes specific dates, names of investors, detailed specification. Please be as verbose and detailed as possible. Leave nothing out. And then it gives a list of things it wants for each advancement. So I ran this a few times. It took 170 seconds to complete. And it output 26,000 tokens of what seems to be like a well-researched essay on the history of computers, sorry. What was also interesting is that it outputted a series of references, something I didn't realize that was maybe built into this model. We've talked about Google's grounded search before, where they'll actually use Google search results to enhance the quality of an output. And it seems to me like this must be enabled by default because I didn't do anything specific to enable it, but it actually referenced its work with quite a lot of references, like 20 references or something like that.
Did you check the references?
No, I didn't. Because I did it so close to the pod. I only did it this morning, so I haven't had time to look. But I tell you what, the results are pretty impressive. If the stuff's legit, and I don't see why it wouldn't be, this is a pretty major thing, especially when you can provide 1 million tokens context. And this is only their Flash model. This is the first time I've been like, wow, this could be really significant with Google. The fact they handle videos natively, they handle audio natively, they handle 1 million contexts, and potentially you can actually get this level of output. Now, keep in mind, I tried to maximize the context window and I only got 26,000 out of 65,000, which is sort of less than a book.
Yeah, but isn't their thinking piece taking up some of those output tokens or not? Are they counting output tokens based on the thinking bit?
Good question. I don't know. Let me, in the background here, I'll run the test again and I'll look at its output to see if it reports using those tokens. This will take 170 seconds, so I'll report back then.
So while you're doing that, we put all of these models to the test. Gemini 2 Flash, the new thinking model, the latest thinking model to clarify. We use Claude Sonnet 01 and also Deepseek-R1. Now, if you're listening and you want to see what we're talking about, you can either just watch along on YouTube later, or in the description, I'm going to leave actual links so you can load up these web pages and simulations and all the different things we've built. Now, we're using the new Create with Code mode, which we promise will launch in roughly 72 hours or less on Sim Theory. So you'll be able to use this for yourself to test different models and different ideas. Now, I'll open it up here so everyone can see it on the screen. Now, the first test, we've got two tests. The first test with the models is make a 3D simulation of airflow over a wing. The user should be able to control the size of the wing, the angle of attack, and the various other elements of the wing and see how the airflow is disturbed. Pretty hard task. This is not easy. Like,
You used a bunch of words I don't even know in
yeah,
there.
calculate laminar flow. So I've got up on the screen now what the Gemini 2 Flash thinking model did. And I also added, I should say, work really hard and make sure it works first go. Just because I got a bit sick of doing it. But what's interesting is it doesn't look like a wing. It's just like a blob flowing through
It's
air.
a nice looking blob.
It looks pretty good.
But yeah.
The airflow is not actually getting disturbed, but you can change like the wingspan, the length of the wing. For a single shot, I would say it's pretty good. You can change the airflow density, which I think is kind of cool, like the amount of
The size of
particles
those pixels. Yeah,
in
that
the
looks
air.
cool.
So pretty interesting. I think with a few more shots,
And you're controlling that with the keyboard or the mouse?
the mouse, so it's like fully 3D in the browser. It's pretty cool. So I was really impressed. The other thing I would say is just the sheer speed of output. I mean, this was literally like, 1, 2, 3, bam, it's out.
Yeah, like you're talking about making a full-blown 3D simulation that runs in the browser with like full-on assets and everything in less than 30 seconds.
Yeah, way less than 30 seconds in that case. So now let's look at DeepSeek. So this is Deepseek-R1's exact same version, exact same prompt. So it's loading up. Now, it actually looks like a wing. And keep in mind, on each of these examples, I got two shots. So I had the initial prompt and then I was allowed one more query. Can you make the wing look like a wing is what I chose to say. I probably should have said, can you make the air flow in the right direction? But anyway. So
it does look a bit more like a spaceship.
Yeah, it actually looks like a real wing though, I should say. And you can control the airspeed, the wing span, but it's not really the wing span. It's like the thickness of the wing. You can control the angle of attack and it does disturb the air, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But I would say it's better than Google Gemini-Thinking, which sort of blows my mind. I would, and we've got a survey at the end, so you can fill in the survey and rank which one you thought was best as well. But I think this is probably better, in my opinion, with two shots on Deepseek-R1. So now let's look at at Claude Sonnet. So again, two shots. Weirdly, exactly the same as Deepseek-R1.
Are there pixels? I don't know if my screen's too small.
No, you just can't see them. There are pixels. But you know what's kind of funny about this whole thing is, like, clearly DeepSeek was trained on the outputs of Sonnet, because you get pretty much the exact same output. Like, it's just so obvious. So you get
Which is an interesting point on its own, like keeping in mind this model you can run yourself. Like Claude is expensive. So being able to run this yourself is unbelievable. I mean, like we say yourself, if you're really rich, GPU rich.
Yeah. So this one, you can control like the airspeed, the chord length, which is more appropriate really. The wingspan, even though the wingspan and chord length are kind of mixed up, but whatever. The angle of attack's on the wrong angle.
You don't want to up your chord length. That's one of the biggest mistakes you can make in aviation.
But I would say out of all of them, again, in terms of presentation and just the overall look, I think Sonnet really nailed it. But I don't know how you could actually distinguish between Sonnet and DeepSeek.
And I've seen from using code use as well, like directing it over, say, up to 10 to 15 prompts, you can really get things to where you want them to be by giving good suggestions and specific things you would like to change.
Okay, so now let's look at 01. Yeah. What the hell? I mean, come on, like we haven't cheated.
Windows 95 of AI models.
It's so bad.
I guess 95 was
like
Windows 2000.
It's 3D, but it looks bad. It's like literally a rectangle. It's not even 3D. Like, the settings are really poor, like poor man developer settings. Anyway, decide for yourself. I'll put these online.
Did you try CodeStrawl? Because I get really good results with CodeStrawl, and also Quen. Quen Coder and just Quen generally also give really good results.
I mean, I can, but they're not in my little test here where you have to rank them. So So let's look at my next example. The next example is a salt lamp e-commerce website, which for some weird reason is my like benchmark that I use. Don't ask why, I have no idea. And so this is Claude 3.5 Sonnet. Now I was allowed I think 3 or 4 goes on this for each of the sites. Now check out this. So it's got a banner. Admittedly, like in sim theory, it can create assets and images and stuff. So that's why they look so complete.
But as you pointed out this morning, the pretty amazing thing about building these landing pages and presentations and stuff with the asset generation is you own the assets. Like you can just use this. Like it's fully legit website once you're done.
Yeah, so I said put a banner on the site with an opacity that says "Welcome to Salt Lamp Oasis." It did that, and it put a picture of a salt lamp store in the background, which I asked for. So its instruction following is amazing. You can actually add all these items to the cart. You can view the cart; it slides out really nicely.
I thought you added me as a salt lamp.
Oh no, that's another example. And then so you can add quantity and it counts perfectly. Yeah, pretty amazing.
So you can actually use the shopping cart.
Fully working shopping cart, not checkout obviously, but close. So that was Claude. Very, very, very impressive. Tuning is all you need. So now let's look at the new Gemini-2 Flash Thinking. And this is the one where I added you as a product for the fun of it.
Sorry, I ruined the joke.
This is the exact same prompts, right? Except I had to ask, can you make it a bit nicer? The design looks really bad. So it works to their credit. Like I can add items to cart. So it was able to do that. It just looks feral. I got it to add a banner. It did add a banner, but the text over the banner is shockingly bad. I got it to add like a logo. I added you as a product, which I thought was pretty funny in your like cosplay Star Trek outfit from last week's episode. But yeah, like it's just a tuning problem, I swear, with the Google models. Like they have no design sense. Like it's shockingly it's gross. But still, in terms of instruction following and how fast it was, impressive, but it's not something I would use.
See, I think this is a good callback to what we were talking about earlier. To me, the first thing I think of when I see that is the thing just needs better examples. It just needs like multi-shot examples in this context. Like if you're building a website, here's a nice way to do it. Here's a shit way to do it. Do it the nice way. And so I think that these are things that can be overcome even with the lesser models.
Yeah, but why can Sonnet do it and the others can't? Like first go. It's like can't they tune them better?
More examples in its training, for example.
Yeah, well, they need to do that because it's clearly a weakness of the other models. Like, and I will keep shitting on them until. But like, hang on. So here's Deepseek-R1 up on the screen now. Exactly the same as Claude. Like on par, totally on par, fully working. I can add items to cart. It doesn't have the cool slide out effects and stuff that it had. It doesn't. I don't think it has quantity. Yeah, you can't up the quantity in here, but it's still on par. Like if I was using this versus Sonnet, it wouldn't really matter. I could multi-shot my way to where I want to go.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
Fully mobile compatible, generated good image, followed instructions. Pretty damn impressive. I mean, I think the hype around Deepseek-R1 is partially because, you know, of how cheap and like available it is, which is extremely well deserved and exciting, but also just like, I mean, it's really a good model. It's a good model.
Yeah,
it's a great model.
I've had great experience with it too, like working day to day, working with Python. It's good. So breaking news, update on the Gemini, and good news for you because you were right. It did use tokens for the thinking.
I thought so, yeah.
Yeah, so have a look. So it's got prompt token count. So my prompt was only 169 tokens. Candidate token count was 27,297. And the total token count was 27,466 in terms of its output. So it's written this massive article. Maybe what I'll do is actually publish the article so everyone can have a look. And it's given a bunch of references again. So citations, it calls them, which is really, really interesting.
It would be the funniest thing if the citations are just hallucinated bullshit.
Yes. So the one interesting thing I've found though is that it obviously has some sort of copyright detection built into it. So it detects copyright in its own output and then refuses to output, which is kind of a bit annoying because you sort of wait all that time and then it's like copyright, but it's like you did it. Like if you're the one checking it, fix it. Like
Yeah, it's like
don't
your
just
fault, bro.
yeah. It's like I didn't break copyright, you did. So
So the just finishing off our last segment, we have created the AI model performance survey, and hilariously, I did that using Claude and Create with Code. And when we announce this, we'll send an email to people that are using Sim Theory. But what's so cool about it is it has its own data model behind it. So not only can you go to the link we'll put in the description and vote who you thought was best in the This Day in AI Coding Challenge survey, but on top of that, we'll actually get the results. And if we remember to next week, which we probably won't, we'll share the results who won. But so you can go to this site, you can vote for Claude Sonnet, O1, DeepSeek, or Google Gemini. Who do you think performed best in our coding challenge? There'll be a link in the description on YouTube or in your podcasting app. I'll put a link in the description below. So
yeah, so
please
it's
vote.
worth mentioning that there's a couple of exciting things we've included in code mode. One is the ability for it to accept form submissions and also all sorts of data. It can essentially accept any data rights, which it'll then save as CSV for your later download or to be notified about, and things like that. And we're looking at eventually putting in a full database in there as well that goes a bit beyond just the CSV. And so it's really cool to be able to publish something and actually get data out of it. The second thing is we're giving the AI its own AI. So it can actually call its own AI. So I've made little games and things like that. Like I did a German language quiz where it is actually dynamically generating the questions based on an LLM call, or like spawning characters based on AI. I actually did one where I got it to play Snake on its own. Now, we probably wouldn't do that in production because it's going to be a lot of API calls, but it's pretty interesting to see what it can do when it knows it has access to an AI itself.
So here's the problem. I'm torn
About the
between
models.
Claude Sonnet and DeepSeek, which just is pretty mind blowing. I like if I was one of the major model providers, I'd be like pretty concerned about DeepSeek, right? Like I'd be really concerned that they've come out with a model on par, with far less expense. So anyway,
This might seem like a stupid question for me because I was the one who integrated it, but does it support images? I don't think it does, right?
it does with us, but I don't know if it does natively. I'm not sure.
Yeah, interesting. Because I think to me that would be the casting vote, right? Like if it's not truly multimodal, then that's a problem.
Also, I wish it had 128K context, which is kind of the norm now. 128 to 200K is like basically you just need that. Like 64K is just not enough.
Yeah, that's true. That will have effects on that.
But you know
glorious
why? It's because all the
context.
thinking's taking up the context, like as we saw with Gemini there. So let's talk about Stargate, the project that was announced with Donald Trump and Sam Altman and a few others, the CEO of Oracle, of course, and they're saying the Stargate project is a new company which intends to invest $500 billion over the next 4 years. 500 billion, people. That's $500 billion USD over the next
Americans
4
are just
years.
so far in debt; they just make up any numbers they want now.
Well,
Right?
it's not
They're
the
like, "Oh, yeah."
government, so don't worry. But 4 years, so over the next 4 years, to build new AI infrastructure for OpenAI in the United States, we will begin deploying $100 billion immediately. The infrastructure will secure American leadership in AI, create hundreds of thousands of American jobs, and generate massive economic benefit to the world. The initial equity funders in Stargate are SoftBank, OpenAI, Oracle, and MGX. Now, outside of, I think I have two views on this. The first is super duper exciting because if these guys believe that it's worth spending $500 billion on scale of AI and they're going to get obviously some ROI on that, which they wouldn't do it if they didn't believe, this could lead to literal, AGI Manhattan Project style project. But then the sort of reality sets in for me, which is like, DeepSeek did just get on par with O1 and Sonnet, spending, peanuts in comparison. And then the second thing that kind of is a little bit odd about all this is from Gavin Baker on X, who says Stargate is a great name, but the 500 billion is a ridiculous number and no one should take it seriously. SoftBank has 38 billion in cash, 142 billion in debt, and generates 3-ish billion in FCF. I think that's just earnings on the money invested, right? They own 143 billion in ARM, which is AMD, isn't it? And 18 billion in Alibaba. Oracle has 11 billion in cash, 88 billion in debt, and generates 10 billion in FCF. OpenAI is burning cash. MGX did not commit to a number and is a 100 billion fund. Maybe 10% of the fund goes into that best case. NVIDIA will limit how much they invest in any one model company. They don't need a monopoly, maybe 5 billion, yada, yada. And he says nowhere close to 500 billion. If you were a professional investor or analyst and you took 500 billion at face value, or even worse, wrote a note about this, you should resign in disgrace. So I don't like.
I love it. I love it. Does he actually envisage someone being like, "Oh, I've screwed this up badly. I quit." Like,
yeah. I mean, I think here are the things that I'll say from this is clearly these people believe scale is all you need. Like, you know, they've been saying it forever. Now they want to invest $500 billion, whether or not they have or have, you know, don't have the cash. The conviction of it speaks volumes to the fact that they believe that scale is all you need. And these are the smartest minds saying, if we go build this, we could, you know, cure cancer potentially. So it's hard to bet against that or bet against it. But there is just, again, that reality check of like, you know, maybe if we see XAI release Grok 3, because it's supposedly trained on the biggest supercluster currently available, and that has some marked improvement, then that gives you a lot more conviction that projects like this will be successful. But then the counter to that, again, is DeepSeek. Like, DeepSeek is better than Grok 2. It's on par with Sonnet, and it is on par, or I think better than O1. Just in terms of using it day to day. So I don't know. Anyway, I don't really know what to make of this. The only comment I will say is SoftBank is notorious for coming in at the top of bubbles, right? Like, this guy is like put, what was it, $10 billion into WeWork right before it collapsed, from 47 billion to 8 billion. He also lost 70 billion in personal wealth in a single day during the dot-com bubble. He used to own 20,000 Bitcoin and sold them right before the crash. Perfectly. He purchased them right before it crashed. Is that it? Or sold? Like, he just has the worst track record.
Excuse my ignorance, but where does he get his money from? If he's like just torching money,
SoftBank is Japanese as like foreign investment fund, and this guy just seemingly
so he's
just
in
tortures
charge
their
of
money.
destroying the wealth of Japan.
Pretty much. I mean, this is probably why they've been so stagnant for so long. They've got this guy just rolling around, just handing out billies. So yeah, like he just
unless he's buying the assets from himself or his mates.
But he announced he's investing 100 billion, and this guy's saying he hasn't got 100 billion. So like, where's it coming from?
Yeah. I mean, good on them. I hope they do it. It's like some of those crazy missions where people are trying to do like the line in Saudi Arabia where they're like, oh, we're going to build 120 kilometer like reflective mirror in the middle of the desert. That's like a full living space with like trains and schools and like just all the stuff. And they're really doing it. Like, I've actually spoken to people who are like bidding for contracts and stuff on it. Like, and it's so insane. But I'm like, I hope they do it. I just want to see what it's like. Like, it'd be great if they actually do it.
Yeah. Again, I'm not betting against it. It's just when you sort of break down the reality of it, you're like, but they don't have the money. Like, clearly they don't. They've just said it. They've just said it. So maybe they'll get it. Maybe
they're just addicted to the rush of announcing stuff. I think
it seems like an attention thing right now. Like, who can get the most attention and the most marketing and brand recognition and value. And I think what Sam Altman successfully has done with OpenAI is realize that if he's constantly, like Elon Musk style, in the media and has all the attention, then he wins. And I think that's what Elon Musk has been so successful at doing. Like everyone's constantly talking about him. He has free marketing. And I think Sam Altman has followed that playbook really well. And I don't know though, I look at people like Larry Ellison from Oracle. I mean, the guy's sort of like semi-retired from my understanding, but he's so focused on trying to cure cancer that he really thinks this is the way to develop these mRNA vaccines that are tailored to each person's individual body to cure cancer. So the fact he's believing in it at 80 years old or whatever he is with such conviction and willing to bet the house on it, I don't know, that does weigh in pretty heavily on it for me. But yeah, I think it's partially just marketing and hype as well. But we'll see. I mean, hopefully they're successful for the world. Like it would be a good thing, not a bad thing.
Sounds like we should just get into the data center business. Like they're going to make money no matter what happens.
Oh, it just sounds like Nvidia is just still going to be cashing the checks. Hey, it's probably not the top yet of that stock. So anyway,
Yep.
So
Let's call it now, so in 6 months we can regret not investing.
So to finish up the show, we need to give a boom factor for these new models. So Deepseek-R1.
Oh, do I need to go to the link?
Well, I'll talk about the link in a minute, but what is your boom factor for Deepseek-R1?
9. I think it's damn exciting. It's fast. I actually use it. And the only reason I'm not saying 10 is I'm just reserving some excitement so I don't have a bit too much inflation on my boom factor ratings.
Yeah, I'm going to go 7. 7
Okay.
booms. And I'll tell you why it's not like a 9 or a 10 for me is, and I hate saying this because I know I'm going to get criticized, but I'm still mostly using Sonnet. Like,
You're
actually?
a paid shill.
To
You're
me,
paid shill.
a
I'm
mega
calling-
boom of 10, right, is I'm now using it as my daily driver.
Yeah, okay.
And a 7 is like, yeah, if Sonnet's down, I'll probably switch to DeepSeek. Like,
Yeah.
But having said that, like, if I if I was like a student and had like no money or whatever and could run DeepSeek for free, I probably would. 100%.
Yeah,
and
that's
you'd
right.
get
Like
a great
you're not
experience.
you're not missing much. It's not like
No,
that
just
much
your
better.
privacy. That's all you've got to sacrifice.
just your privacy, dignity,
and all your
that.
data. All right. So boom factor for Deepseek-R1. You can tell us your boom now. We've created with Create with Code a boom factor survey. Now I do want to demo this because it's hilarious. There's a picture of a whale in the background because that's of course DeepSeek's logo. You can drag the boom slider. You'll see there's a nice animation on it. Thank you, Claude. So I'll put in my 7 here.
I like that you made it with Claude and not DeepSeek.
Yeah. Shut up. And so I put in the email. I'll put in my email and I'll submit the boom. Now listen to this. Oh, it even has a boom based on the boom factor. So there. So that link will also be in the description. So tell us which model you think did best at our code challenge, and also give your own boom factor for Deepseek-R1. Now, the boom factor we didn't ask for is Gemini-2 Flash Thinking Experimental, whatever the date is after it, version. What about that, Chris?
I'm gonna go an 8, which I never thought I would for a Google model. And the reason I'm going so high is, here's the thing I'm excited about. We're actually seeing large amounts of output tokens. I really, really want to try that more with. I've used it with code mode, but I want to try it more, like pushing it to output multiple files and much more. Secondly, I want to explore this research citation element to it and bring that into sim theory, because right now, while you can use the model in sim theory, we're not bringing the citations in, and we absolutely should because they're there. And I just generally want to experiment using its massive input context size and massive output context size to see where we get to with it. So I think just in terms of my excitement of wanting to try it and see what it's capable of, and also just the anticipation if they bring out one of the main Geminis based on the same stuff, that could be pretty exciting.
Honestly, for me, the speed is just the big factor, because you think about these thinking models, like DeepSeek's quite fast. O1's simply too slow for me to use daily. I just don't get any benefit from it, so it's too slow.
Yeah.
Whereas Gemini thinking or Flash thinking, these names are stupid. It is so fast. You could totally use it. I mean, it outputs code quicker than Sonnet. It outputs
That's
code.
it confused me, because when I heard thinking, I assume, there's multiple iterations, so it'll definitely by definition be slower, but it just isn't. It's fast.
Because I think what Dario said when we were talking about at the top is complete and utter bullshit. It's like, it's just, yeah. I think it's just a model is a model right now, and it's just different ways of
to be
getting
clear,
out
I
there.
also said it was bullshit.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I know he's better than me, but still.
Yeah,
I said
no,
it
of
also.
course. I mean, he has all the billies. We should bring back, I think, into our merch store the dog tags with Dario's face on it. I'd like to get some. I'm going to get some and wear that as a chain permanently around my neck until there's a better model than Sonnet. And then I'll get that dog tag. So I'm going to bring that back into the store, limited time. I'll order. Hopefully it's not a scam. And
you experiment for everyone, then we can confirm it's not.
hey,
totally
the hat came. The hat came, and so the hat came. That was
that's
good.
true.
That's
I got
very
some
poor
of the
quality
things,
hat.
I got my mug. Like, I've had this for a while now. I need a new one.
So any final thoughts on the week that was, or the 2 weeks that was, because we just decided to not record last week. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry everyone. I think it's exciting. I think it's a really exciting time because we're seeing these meaningful announcements with models that actually bring something to the table. I'd encourage everyone to try Deepseek-R1. One comment I do want to make, because a lot of people have asked the question around whether it's the Chinese one or not. Right now, the version in Sim Theory is the Chinese one, like through the DeepSeek API directly. However, we have access to both DeepSeek V3 and Deepseek-R1 through a US provider, and we'll be adding those this week. So, what for now? Assume that you're using the China one, and then we'll make it explicit when we move to the US one, just so everybody is aware for people who are either unable or unwilling to send their data through that one.
Yeah, and so the only other final thing I'd say is we'll have an announcement soon. I know we're a little bit delayed on our holiday update, but hey, some people could still be technically on holidays with Sim Theory, but we do have this data visualization, create with code, a whole bunch of other features. Like it's literally our biggest update to Sim Theory ever. And I'm fine to hype it because my God, you're going to have fun with this release. There's so many practical things in it.
There's also performance improvements, context handling improvements, and a whole bunch of other things that Mike and I have had the benefit from and no one else has.
Instant voice connectivity where it can literally stay omnipresent in the background all day without disconnecting. Things that.
Yeah, we fixed push to talk. That works. There's going to be a configurable delay after you finish speaking. I know Mbellic from Discord needs that feature for his language learning. And also there's going to be like better language handling as well for people who speak in languages other than English. So it's a really huge voice improvement. It's the way it should have been originally, as well as the code update and a whole bunch of others.
Anyway, we'll stop talking about it. We'll get back to work and we'll get it into your hands so we can stop teasing you all about it. But if you do want your own AI workspace, simtheory.ai, we also will be releasing team and enterprise workspaces in a couple of weeks, which I'm really excited to share as well. And that's very, very far along. So lots in store for you from our end, and a lot of the promises we've made will finally keep.
Maybe.
Then we might record a show next week as well. You'll have to tune in to find out or not actually be able to tune in. All right. Thanks again for listening. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, all those things. We
buy our merch.
We can't actually see our reviews anymore because the service we use shut down. But if you want to leave more average reviews, we'd be very pleased. So thanks for listening. We'll see you next week. Bye.